Hi guys, it's good to be back with you. So I get to introduce our character trait for the month of January. And I'm really excited to introduce this trait. I've been studying this trait and I am just like, oh my goodness, if we could learn to be this way as followers of Christ, this could change the world. So the character trait this month is charity. And I'm sure at first you think charity, isn't that something like my mom and dad donate to? When you think of charity, usually you think of like maybe giving money to like an orphanage or maybe like dogs who are homeless or something like that. But this idea of charity is very different than that. So I want to read the character trait, the definition of charity, and it's this. Charity is generously providing for those in need. It describes a heart that is ready to love and care for others in need. You see, out of a heart of charity flows a heart of service. And the greatest example we have of someone who displays this character trait is Jesus. So I thought this morning we would just go ahead and look at one example in the scriptures of charity that Jesus shows us. So I am going to read from John 13 this morning, and I'm going to start in verse 3. So if you have your Bible, you can follow along. If not, I'm going to have the words right up here on the screen for you. So it says this, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Now Peter goes on to say, oh, Jesus, don't wash my feet. And he kind of gets in a little scuffle with Jesus. And Jesus says, I need to wash your feet. It's important that I wash your feet. And so we're going to skip that part because it's part of the story. We're going to skip it and we're going to go to verse 12. So I'm going to read from verse 12 now, and it says this. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done. So we're going to start by taking a look at the beginning of this passage, and I want to point out something to you. It says that Jesus poured water in the basin and began washing the disciples' feet. Now, some of us might have heard this story before, but let's think about this for a second. This was in the time of Jesus's day. This was a long time ago, almost 2,000 years ago. And do you know what that tells us? That people didn't have the kind of things we have today, like shoes, right? They had sandals, but they weren't even real sandals. They were kind of like a board on the bottom of your foot with a leather strap, just like this picture. And this leather strap and this board on the bottom of your feet really didn't protect your feet very well. So guess what? Your feet got really dirty. And not only did they get dirty, maybe they got like twigs. They could have gotten stuff inside them. They could have had cuts on them because they were walking on dirt and rocks and twigs and bushes. That was how they walked. So look at this picture of these dirty feet. Do you see the dirt on the feet of this picture? I mean, it's pretty gross. But think of that. Jesus, the God of the universe who came down in human form, gets down on his hands and knees before all of his disciples. And he doesn't wash one of their feet. He washes all of their feet. And do you know something that's really amazing? Jesus knew exactly who these men were. He knew that one of them would betray him. He knew that most of them would deny him, and he still kneeled and he still washed their feet. Let's go back to our definition of charity. It is generously providing for those in need. It describes a heart that is ready to love and care for others in need. If Jesus washing the disciples' feet doesn't describe charity, I don't know what does. Because if you think about it, think about the love that Jesus would have had for his disciples to get down on his hands and knees and wash their feet. If we are going to be people who practice charity in our own lives, we need to know it will take sacrifice. And that's our first point. Charity takes sacrifice. It takes us going beyond. It takes us getting out of our comfort zone. And like it said, it's generously providing for those who are in need. Let's take a look at our passage again. Now we're going to look at the second part of our passage. And we're going to look at verse 14. And it says this: "So if I, the Lord and the teacher, wash your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example so that you also would do just as I do for you." Jesus says that he is Lord and teacher. Do you know what that means? You see, being a teacher in those days was a very highly respected position. You were usually thought of with high regard. And Jesus says, if you are the ones who call me Lord and teacher, and I wash your feet, so you should do the same. He was displaying the ultimate example to the disciples and to us today of what it looks like to be a servant. And do you know what we can learn about charity from this passage too? Charity is shown by our service to one another. When you display the character of charity, you will have a heart that is ready to love and serve others just as Jesus did. Jesus showed this in who he was here on this earth in so many ways, and washing the disciples' feet was just one of the many ways. But when we think about charity, we can take this same idea. How can you wash another's feet? You may not wash their feet literally, right? We're probably not going to get down on our hands and knees and scrub the feet of our friends, right? That would be kind of silly, because we do have shoes today, and we have socks, and we have things that protect our feet. But what are some ways that you can show charity to someone else? Let's think of the definition again. Generously providing for another who is in need. It shows a heart of love and service to another person. So this month, we are going to be encouraging you to find ways to show charity and serve one another. So I've asked Mrs. Johnson to come up, and she's going to help you brainstorm just for a few minutes ways that you can be charitable to one another, ways you can think about serving one another. And guess what? Not just your friends, not just your peers, but guess what? You can serve in so many different ways. You can serve and show charity to your family at home. You can serve and show charity to maybe someone at church. Maybe you're walking down the road and you see a homeless man and you want to give him some food. Those are great ways to show charity to someone else. And remember, it's not just giving money that's charity, but it's giving of your heart to someone else. Let's end with remembering our buzz phrase for this month. And that is, as you are able, be charitable. All right, well, thanks for listening today, and have fun with Mrs. Johnson brainstorming different ways that you can be charitable to one another. I'll see you next week. Bye.